welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Team Needham Abode podcast studio, and we are super excited to have Gabriela Rosa on our podcast today to talk about health freedom and fertility. She is an international guest, depending on where she's living. Sometimes Australia, I think that's where she's streaming from now. So, Gabriela, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's such a privilege.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, your background and how you got here discussing fertility.
Thank you. Yes, I have been helping couples overcome infertility and recurrent miscarriage and failed treatments since 2001. So I kind of lose count of the number of years that this has been going on, but I'm sure we can do the math. And so essentially, I have a very specific focus with the couples that I treat, because most of the people that come to me are coming to me as a last resort. They've tried all of the usual recommendations. They've put their feet up. They've gone and done IVF and it hasn't worked. They've been told donor egg is the answer and it still fails. So, most of the people who come to me, they really are wanting to understand what's going on for them on a much deeper level. And so I'm trained originally as a naturopathic doctor. And so, holistic medicine is definitely where I look at the situation from, so to speak. But I've got, since starting, I completed a master's in reproductive medicine and human genetics. I've completed a master's in public health at Harvard, and I'm currently doing my doctorate there. And so that's kind of the around the world background of how we got to be here today. But yeah, that's pretty much the focus that I have.
So tell me a little bit about, I was doing some research on you, and tell me a little bit about your book, Joyful Surrender, and about letting go when it comes to infertility and miscarriage.
Yeah, so that actually is my sixth book. and
Okay.
and Fertility Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage is the one before that. But Joyful Surrender came about because one of the big things that happens, when couples are having difficulty conceiving, is that ability to have the mindset that they really need to do everything that they can to optimize their fertility, but at the same time, get back into connection with themselves about their feelings and emotions. Because as you can imagine, one of the big things that happens for people who are struggling with any aspect of their health, it's so easy to get hyper focused on what's not working, right? And get so upset and angry and frustrated with your body and the fact that you feel like you're being let down, and you've tried all the things that you've been told, and why is it that it's not working and it's not happening and it's your fault. Sometimes, especially women, men tend to have a little bit of a different approach to this, and we can talk about that in a minute. But especially women really take infertility and miscarriage very personally. They really feel like they really internalize that, there's something wrong with me. And, that's partly societal. That's partly how the healthcare system is structured. There's a whole lot of different aspects that lead to that kind of mindset in the person. But the entire reason why Joyful Surrender came up was because my doctoral project focuses on expressive writing as an intervention for addressing infertility related trauma and grief, and the kind of negative impact that it has on quality of life. So what we know about the research on expressive writing is that writing things down, especially difficult feelings and difficult emotions, is a wonderful way of allowing them to kind of pass through you. To kind of allow that whole difficult challenge that you're holding to kind of be let down and left on the paper. And so it kind of chisels away at those very difficult feelings and emotions. So that's why I brought joyful surrender into the world. But in terms of, it doesn't necessarily have the same kind of backdrop of data and information and practical how-tos and to-dos that obviously Fertility Breakthrough does, the book. And Fertility Breakthrough is free on Spotify and YouTube, so people can kind of go in and get that as well if they want to. But yeah, that's kind of how Joyful Surrender came up.
Awesome. So, Janet, what questions do you have?
Okay, so I'm going to speak from a mother's perspective. I can see how women could identify so closely to losing a pregnancy, because we're the first to hear the heartbeat or feel the differences in our body. And I feel like when somebody miscarriages, especially in my sister's situation, is it was multiple. And so she got to a place where she didn't tell people she was pregnant anymore. She didn't tell people she miscarried. It was just like voodoo, right? It was like, don't even, and then to acknowledge the, even between her partner, it was like to acknowledge what happened was very, very difficult. And, I can see how women can be very trapped in that. And then when I look at other people that I've seen, like in my childhood, who adopted a couple children and then all of a sudden there's their own, right? Like it just kind of happened. So the stress level, I think, has to be part of the fertility problem, right? Like their body's so stressed out that until that's dealt with, perhaps it's not going to happen. And that could be emotional, mental, physical, all of that thrown into the basket.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to that. And what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's we
Right.
know now it's the chicken, but according to
Right.
science.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that one of the really interesting things, because sometimes people have this concept, they've been going through this roller coaster of
Mhm.
inability to conceive, inability to keep a healthy pregnancy to term. And because of that, they get very stressed. And
Right.
as a result of getting very stressed, they then have this connection with their body signaling as a result of that really kind of difficult situation that they're experiencing. So the question then becomes, what came first? Was it the stress, or was it like, and of course, life stresses and, lots of different types of difficulties that people can encounter may impact their hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axes for sure. But that is one of the many reasons as to why infertility and recurrent miscarriage occurs. And it's not even the most common, but it's the one that's most prevalently kind of thought about by people who perhaps haven't looked at the whole gamut of things, because it's the one that's easy to see, you know? But in that, I also say, think about this for a second. People in war zones get pregnant and have babies all the time. So if it was
100%.
yeah, so if it was just the stress, because a lot of times people come to me completely overwhelmed and anxious and stressed and feeling so low and down about this issue that they're experiencing. And they're so concerned that their stress is impacting their fertility and that then they're not going to get pregnant. And I say to them, it is not going to help you to stress about stressing. That's for
Right.
sure.
Right.
you know, so I think we need to stop that. But at the same time, acknowledge that, okay, what are some of the self care strategies and self care aspects that I can implement? Whether it's writing, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's deciding to paint, whether it's do you know what I mean? Like, what are the
Right.
things that actually make you feel lighter? Do that.
Right.
Do that for sure. But then understand that from a biochemical perspective, there are many other things going on, right? And the question isn't so much, because sometimes people come to me and they've experienced, like, had a couple who I interviewed recently for my creation stories, patients who come into my clinic when they've had their baby, we get them to tell their story and we make this beautiful little keepsake video for them. And this couple's story was really interesting. They had decided, they got married and they decided that they were not going to use contraception. That same kind of like thought pattern that people sometimes have of like, oh, if it happens, it happens. So they
Right.
stopped using contraception and decided that if they got pregnant and had a baby, that would be lovely. But they also weren't kind of like really focused on the whole thing about having a baby. 7, 8 years passed and they didn't get pregnant in that let's see what happens, no
Mhm.
contraception type situation. Then after 8 years, they decided, okay, let's go and start trying. They started trying and it wasn't happening straight away. So because they kind of knew that they were not using contraception, they thought, well, maybe we should do something about it. 6 IUI cycles later, they were still not pregnant. Then the doctor recommends that they go and do IVF. So they
Right.
then go and do IVF, 2 failed cycles. Then they come to us and, at that point she was 41 and, 14 years had passed. And, she's like going, well, look, they're telling me that it's my eggs, there's a problem with my eggs. Obviously they're old, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, let's have a look at the whole picture. Let's have a look at the entire case here and see what's going on. Because often in long-standing infertility, it's actually not that the egg and the sperm are not meeting. They are meeting, but implantation failure is occurring. And in a
Right.
situation like this is exactly as we evidence by the fact that, we've got clear fallopian tubes, we've got sperm. So we literally have gotten the IUI cycle to get the sperm then the egg to meet, 2 failed IVF cycles, got the sperm, got an embryo was transferred and there was no positive pregnancy test. So that, in my mind, I'm thinking recurrent miscarriage, because
Right.
ultimately this is not simply we're not getting the egg and the sperm to meet, right? So anyway, I started treating them as we treat both partners always. We treat the man and the woman. I get his semen analysis back and I look at it and I go, so you have very low sperm count. He's like, no, I was told my sperm count was normal. So I look at it and I said, listen, you have 2 million sperm. You need to have at least 20 million to affect a natural
Mhm.
conception. So by all definitions, you have low sperm count. And he goes, oh, I was never told that. So I'm like, wow. 14 years of infertility, multiple failed cycles, and didn't even know he had low sperm count. Long story short, we continued our investigations and looking at what was going on. We found that they both had a silent infection that needed treatment with antibiotics that
Mm.
would never enable a pregnancy to implant and let
Right.
alone be taken to term, right? And we went on to treat that. They conceived naturally. We got his sperm up to 36.4 million first,
Wow.
and then they were able to conceive naturally after being
Right.
told, there's nothing wrong, everything's normal, just keep trying, you don't like like when a patient is hearing that because doctors are not investigating deeply and understanding what else needs to be taken into consideration, of course in that time frame, I mean, imagine 14 years of
Right.
wishing for a child and not getting pregnant and being told that, well, actually your eggs are old. Wait, they weren't old to begin with. So
Right.
what,
Yeah.
like
Right.
No.
like
And
how did
generations
this happen?
before, my grandmother had 15 children. Excuse me. It's like that's just
Exactly,
like,
exactly.
no.
Usually in situations where it hasn't been straightforward, because this is really what happens in the general population. The reason that we hear people, oh, so and so had an oops baby, and my neighbor who drinks and does whatever, had a one night stand and had got pregnant. Like you hear all of these things, and you kind of go, or people are like, oh, we weren't trying, but we got pregnant. The reason is that at peak fertility in the general population, over 90% of people conceive within 3 intercourse attempts, right? So literally, it's have sex, get pregnant, have a baby, done. We're no longer having this conversation. The second we're still having this conversation beyond 3 months, we need to start thinking about, okay, what else is going on here? Because at that point, there's possibly obstacles that are getting in the way,
Right.
and people haven't really been able to identify or pinpoint them yet. And the reason that that doesn't get pinpointed is because when you go to your doctor and say, hey, I'm trying to get pregnant and it hasn't happened, there are 4 things that they will do. They will check for ovulation. They will check to see if the fallopian tubes are clear, hopefully. They will do a uterine, kind of ultrasound to see, do we have a uterus and is it normally shaped? And they may do a semen analysis, right? And if they don't do a semen analysis because it was the female patient who went in and the partner wasn't there and he was just basically told, hey, you need to go and have one, and he hasn't gone and had one, the onus and the focus is going to be solely on the female. The doctor will say, we've done all of the tests, because they've done those 3 tests, right? Which are
Right.
all of the tests they are required to do. We've done all of the tests and everything is normal.
Mm.
You know,
Normal,
and
Right.
so that
normal
customer is way
to medical
serious.
standards, right? Normal to medical standards.
And this is the thing, right? I mean, what
Yeah.
is normal? You see, this is where I think the word normal is completely misused in reproductive
Right.
medicine, because what is normal is you have sex, you get pregnant, and you have a baby. That's normal.
That's
Right.
right.
Any
Right.
permutation or variation of that is abnormal.
That's right.
Right. Right.
Well, and the
And
reality of
so,
it is, when we're in, the reproductive years of ages, um, if you're healthy, it should be easy to get pregnant, male and female. And
100%.
and one of the problems is that, as you probably know, and you can discuss this, is that um, if you're not healthy, you can't get pregnant. I mean, those are just like you say, the underlying infection. That's not healthy. There's underlying infection there on both of them, and that's why they couldn't stay pregnant, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say a healthy body is a fertile body, right?
Correct.
And vice
Absolutely.
versa. And so we do have to take into account, I often get asked, how is it, what can we do to improve our fertility? And my answer is always the same: pregnant now to get pregnant later. What that means
Right.
is whatever
Mhm.
you would do, if you were able to just, and the men always have to indulge me on this one, but imagine you could get pregnant and you could gestate a child, right? Women, it's easy for women to kind of imagine this, but men they need a little bit more, a kind of additional support on that one. But if you imagine that, right, and you imagine that, okay, right now in utero, wherever a male utero would be, but in utero, you have that little baby that you want to create and that you're gestating that child. If you were in that situation, you would think about, okay, what are all of the things that if I want to have the healthiest possible baby and give my baby the best possible start in life, what are the things that I would absolutely start doing and
Right.
absolutely stop doing
Right.
to ensure that my baby had all of the best possible environment, right? And we know what those things are. You'd stop drinking, you stop smoking, you stop doing drugs, like you would clean up your lifestyle, you would sleep better, you would exercise more, you would eat vegetables, you would, like
Right.
all of the things that you already know to be healthy are the things that you would put in place if you were pregnant gestating that child. Now, here's the really big important piece is that by the time a baby is 8 weeks old in utero, little fetus, little embryonic bunch of cells. Actually, by then it's actually a little fetus, and by that stage, it's actually already got all its little organs, all its little
Mhm.
fingerprints. And so, what happens from that point onwards is that it just grows,
Mm.
right, and it further develops. But by 8 weeks gestation, all its predispositions and health, kind of abilities and potentials are in place. Therefore, the time to truly optimize a child's health is not when a pregnancy has already been in place. It's way before conception even occurs. And on the biology of how things are, what happens is that this is really interesting, but it takes about a year for the egg to mature. So to go from primordial
Mm.
follicle, women are born with all the eggs we'll ever have. So from primordial follicle to primary follicle, it's the first stage of development, takes about 6 months. From primary follicle to ovulatory follicle takes another 4 to 6 months. Now, it's not to say that you can't be improving and optimizing the quality of the cells throughout that entire stage and throughout that entire year. But really, it's not a situation where you kind of leave it to when a pregnancy is in place to improve your chances to keep a healthy pregnancy to term and deliver a healthy baby. So, and the sperm, of course, it forms much faster. Every 3.5 to 4 months, you've got a whole brand new lot of cells. It's like the red blood cells in the body. Every 4 months, we have brand new blood. So the same happens. And that's how kind of like the focus, the idea, the mindset that we need to have around fertility is that it's a future investment.
Right.
It's not something that you get to go and withdraw before you've put in and you've invested in that approach, into that next stage of life. So that also is something that I think people need to consider, and that often is not something that people think about.
Well, back on the egg production, I mean, you could make a very valid argument that, what the young woman ate as a teenager or as even, elementary school age is going to affect their eggs later on. And,
Well,
and that,
yeah.
and that,
Yeah.
right. And you could even argue way back when,
In vitro.
Well, you can argue
what the
that
mother,
her grandmother ate.
Yep.
Because you see, here's the thing, and this is also a really interesting concept, is that we were all in our grandmother's wombs.
Right.
Because we were all in our grandmother's wombs. So what our grandmothers did, how they lived their lives, all of that will impact many future generations. When a woman is gestating a female baby, that female baby is going to have all of the eggs that is going to produce her own children. So that's how, it's a kind of like mind expanding, if you think about it. It's a bit challenging in some ways, but that's, whatever our grandmothers did and our mothers will impact us as well. And it's not to say, it's not a death sentence, so to speak. If your mother was like, my mother smoked in her kind of like early years and, all of that. The reality of it is that you can't change those aspects, but you can. It's like the whole point of epigenetics, the environment pulls the trigger at the end of the day. The genes load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. And at the end of the day, we still have agency over what genes are signaled, which are turned off. And all of our behaviors in our day-to-day will help to optimize how our body expresses.
I like to say that we can't change our genetics, but we can change the way our genes are expressed.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. And in fertility, we see that regularly.
Time and time again.
Right. So this is really encouraging, right? Like, this is empowering people, because sometimes these lifestyle things aren't going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to just take a change in your activity and your lifestyle choices. And that's impactful, because we've heard, it's all what your doctor can do, or what, your insurance company will allow, and what is the trend of the time in modern medicine. But really, it comes down to little decisions every day that we choose to either ingest, sleep,
or
activity,
not
or not, right? Like, it comes down to us as an individual, which gives us so much more power.
Absolutely. And look, I think that one of the things that people often want is that agency. They want to understand. And so many times I'll have patients come to me after very prolonged journeys, on fertility journeys. And they will say that they've been to many doctors, and every doctor that they've asked, is there something else I can do to improve my fertility, to improve my chances? And the doctor said, no, there's nothing else. And I'm thinking, gosh, what message are we sending into the world?
Right.
And especially given my background in public health, like, obviously I have a master's in public health. I'm completing my doctorate in public health. So I see how, the healthcare system around the world, because we see patients in every continent other than Antarctica at this point. So I see every healthcare system around the world. And unfortunately, whether it's a universal or privatized healthcare system, the message is so the same when it comes to how people can actually take charge of their health. And it's always this kind of pattern of thinking that no, it's the doctor out there that's in charge of my health and my fertility, as opposed to actually, what are the things that I can do? So I really like the idea that you've just put forward, which is there is so much that can be done. And often when people feel like they've done everything and nothing has worked, what that really means is that they've reached the top, the ceiling of what they know,
Right.
or
Right.
they haven't actually effectively implemented. Either
Right.
one of those two things is true. It's very easy to think, I eat healthy, and then you start doing a food diary and writing
Right.
down everything that crosses your lips. And then you go at the end of the week and you review it and you go, oh, wow, I didn't know that I ate so much sugar in my diet. And I didn't know that I wasn't actually getting enough protein. And I didn't know that, because it's so easy to forget. Like you have a great one meal right now, and then the next one is like, I don't know, fries. And you think like, well, I had a great meal. I had a great, salad and vegetables and everything was fantastic. And we forget. And then
Mhm.
like 3 days later, if I was to ask you, what did you have for breakfast 3 days ago? Unless you have the exact same thing for a year in a row, you will not remember what you
Yeah.
had for
Right.
breakfast 3 days ago. And the same happens with every other person. So what happens is that people think they implement because they went to the gym one time that week, and so they're being healthy. Now your body actually needs you to move every day.
Right.
And when it comes to fertility, weights training is one of the best things to address insulin resistance, irregular
Mhm.
cycles, all of that. How many people are going to the gym and actually lifting heavy weights 4 times a week, which is the minimum recommended? Most people are not. They might go once a month and go, "Oh, I'm being healthy, I'm going to the gym."
Mhm.
you know?
Right.
And so it's
Yeah.
also that kind of like delusion that we have, that because we agree with a message of being healthy and, doing the things, that it's the same as actually doing it. Actually, it's not the same. So that's
Right.
important to really focus on.
But the view of what's healthy has really changed, right? Like, so I'm going to talk about my grandmother. She was up at the crack of dawn. Like, her
Mhm.
day was filled with chores and different things that she was doing, but everything that they consumed came from the land that they were making it from. Like, they produced
Yeah.
it, and right? So everything was, at that time, there weren't chemicals on the field or the crops or the animals weren't, inoculated, but they had a pattern of what they did every single day. And honestly, like, even when I look back at my father and his generation, I mean, I used to think he was the strongest person on earth because they worked physically and did things
Mhm.
physically every single day. Maybe they didn't run a marathon, but they were moving and doing things on a regular basis. So when people talk about fitness, I don't think they understand what that fitness is. I don't think they realize that, from the time you're a child, you're carrying a bucket or you're, doing some chores or doing, and so we come to this state where we are sitting in front of a computer at an office, or we're standing, and we see this in our office where every day people show up with that drink that's, I don't know
Oh,
how many ounces it is anymore.
and full of
But
sugar. And it's
Yeah.
just like,
right, and it's just one more, and it's throughout the day. They might go the second time, I might see them, and I'm like, you haven't ate anything good for you or drank
mm,
anything, like
mm,
water, or
yeah, yeah.
right. I mean, the decisions, and then when we get to where we are with physiques and looking at people whether they're healthy or not, we've shamed the idea that if you're overweight, we shouldn't talk about that. Like,
Yeah,
being overweight
yeah,
and obesity is, you're being rude or you're being shameful or you're being bad, but really it's actually worse to not address these things.
100%. You know, a really interesting thing you've just pointed out, and I think that a lot of people don't realize, there was a wonderful paper talking about the definition of sedentarism. And, you know, the fact that most people sit and or are in front of the computer the whole day and are not actually physically active and walking around. You know, what is interesting is that people think that because they go to the gym 1 hour or two, three, four, however many, even an hour a day, I got the biggest shock of my life because I train, right? I train, I do bodybuilding and weightlifting and, you know, like that. And that's been
Mhm.
something that I've done for the last 7 years. It's really a part of my life. My coach is an athlete, you know, kind of like it's so I really I focus on ensuring that I am as healthy as I can be and that I focus on my strength for the long term. So I
Right.
got this paper and I was like, oh my God. And the definition in the paper of being sedentary is that if you are sitting or lying down for more than 6 hours a day, you are
Mm,
sedentary, even if you go to the
mhm.
gym.
That's
So
most every American.
I was
Oh,
looking at my Aura ring. No, listen, this
wow.
is
Yeah.
the part that I was like, I'm at the gym for 2 hours. I train heavy. I can lift a proper man, right? And so it's like when I
Mhm.
literally looked at the fact that I am a active couch potato, that was the definition in this paper, right? That you can be a couch potato, i.e., you don't go to the gym or do any kind of physical activity, but if you go to the gym and do physical activity and you sit for more than 6 hours a day, you are an active couch potato. And I was like, oh my God. And that, like, for somebody like me who actually has the focus of ensuring that in my day to day I am physically active, it horrified me. So literally, I was like, okay, let me get my desk treadmill. That's why I have a standing desk. That's why, you know, like I've got my
Mhm.
treadmill so that literally I can be
Moving.
exercising, I can be
Yeah.
implementing the things that are going to benefit me in my long term. Because what you said is so correct. You know, at the end of the day, previous generations, they were dying from, you know, kind of communicable diseases. They were dying from
Yeah.
infections.
Right.
You know, and so our life expectancy has increased drastically because of antibiotics, because of hygiene, because of, you know, sewage and
Yeah.
all the things that essentially we now have, which are it's wonderful. And now we're dying of non-communicable diseases, which is being sedentary, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, you know, all of these things, because we've lost touch with what it actually means to be healthy.
Well, and Janet mentioned, that our ancestors probably didn't run a marathon, and she's right. They didn't run a marathon, but I bet you our great great
The
great grandparents,
equivalent.
they walked a marathon every day.
Oh, well,
Def-
They didn't run one, but they walked one every day. They
Yeah,
moved all day long. I mean, if you think about
yeah,
before cars and before tractors, especially if they were riding horses and they were running
yeah,
cattle, they
yeah.
walked a marathon plus every day. And talking about, there was no such thing as exercise. I mean, because they were lifting bales to feed cattle, they were carrying
Exactly.
buckets of water, they were lifting heavier stuff than we lifted all day long at the gym, more than we
Yeah,
lifted ever
for
dreamed of
sure.
lifting. Right.
For
throughout the
sure.
day,
Throughout the day,
throughout the
all day
day.
long.
It wasn't just in one sitting. I think that that's
Exactly.
the important part of it. And, you
Huge.
know, as our generations, I mean, I'm more fearful for my children wives, right? Like I'm more fearful for them because at least I experienced having to be active from an early age, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
so many people out there that have no idea how to move. And like you said, even if they did go to the gym,
Mm.
And think
No,
about
and
our
it's kids today, right? I mean, if you think about it,
yeah,
kids in school, they sit the entire day. Like I have my kids, because my kids are 10 and 10 and
mm,
13. And so I literally have them like doing basketball 4 times a week because I'm like, You gotta go. You gotta move.
right.
You
yeah,
know, let's go. And I take them, like I go, we're gonna go for a walk. Let's go. You know, because otherwise they're literally, if you let them, they will sit in front of those screens permanently.
yeah.
Well, they've been taught to sit still and not move and not talk.
It's
We've
crazy.
taught a generation, if not multiple generations, to not move, which is really not healthy
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
long term. I mean,
Absolutely.
what happened to getting kids out and running them and then bringing them back in? It's like, oh, this is dangerous for you. Well, actually, it's more dangerous to sit in that seat and not
Yeah.
move
Well,
and
they
focus.
say, yeah, I mean, scientists are now saying that sitting is the new smoking.
It's the most dangerous thing we can do in American
I
is
agree.
nothing.
Or throughout
That's
the
the
world.
most dangerous thing you
Yeah.
can do. I mean,
Yeah.
Think about all the kids that we have, and whether it's fertility or if it's ADHD or not being able to learn. Well, of course, your brain is not firing and your body's not firing if you're
Yeah.
not moving.
Yeah.
and I want to go back on what we define the healthcare system as, because you mentioned, Gabriela, that they'll go to the healthcare system with fertility problem. They say, well, you're doing everything right. And it's like, first of all, let's just call it what it is. No matter what country it's not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
treat sick people, and we already discussed this early on.
Yeah.
If you're healthy, you're not going to have a problem getting pregnant.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are the facts.
Yeah.
So if you've been doing all the things that we're talking about, sleep, movement, correct diet, you don't need healthcare to get pregnant. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, so many young women now do, because they're not healthy. And
Couples.
sometimes, yeah,
Couples.
I should say
I
that. You're
agree
right.
with
You're
that.
exactly right. And the men are they're 50% of it, right? And
Mhm.
the reason why is because of things were discussed. They think they're healthy because they're ignorant. They don't know any different. But
Yeah.
healthy men is not sitting on a couch eating Cheetos, drinking beer, watching college football. That is not a healthy man. That's not how you get healthy.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And just, actually on that note of sitting, for men in particular, is so problematic because it heats up the testicles and the sperm die and they become deformed and they become, so infertility is especially at the rates that we're seeing these days, is definitely um, an increased disease of the modern age. I'm not saying that it happens
Yeah.
more than in what it used to, but the lifestyle component of infertility is definitely on the rise, right? Because of exactly what you just said. People not necessarily implementing what they deep down know is going to benefit their health.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I mean, so Janet and I are two pharmacists, and we specialize in hormones. So we see the hormone issues on the male, mostly the women, but also the men. I mean, we're seeing
Yeah.
20-year-old men with testosterone levels
That are
of an
tanked.
80-year-old man.
It's
Right.
absolutely crazy,
Yeah.
and what's interesting about that, is that, for example, I was reading a study just recently. For every 5 hours of nights slept, so basically, if you only get 5 hours of sleep, you decrease your testosterone as a man by 10 years. So this
Wow.
chronic sleep insufficiency that we as a society are breeding, because all we care about is staying up and watching Netflix until
Right.
3 a.m. and then
Yeah.
having to get up at 8 to go to
Yeah.
work, whatever, right? We are literally breeding infertility in the society because these, testosterone levels is one of the first things that, if you're not sleeping enough, is going to drop. And then, because
Right.
you're not sleeping enough, you're not eating the right foods, you're not actually going to the gym and doing any exercise. Weights training is going to be the thing. Muscle building and weights training is one of the things that will help to boost testosterone in men. They're not doing it.
And they're not eating
It's
quality
And
protein.
not
They're
eating.
eating fast
yeah,
food.
Yeah. And I mean,
absolutely.
testosterone's a hormone of vitality.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
when you're sedentary, when men are sedentary, sitting around eating junk food, watching Netflix, doing nothing, your body says, you know what? This guy doesn't need to reproduce. I'm just being honest. That's exactly what your body says.
I'm
And
out.
I mean, but go out, sprint, move all day, lift heavy things, and your testosterone can move 300-400 points when you're in your 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so much benefit to be had both for men and women, with enhancing these lifestyle habits, but and actually being consistent. I think that consistency is the key to
Huge.
optimization, because there's not going to do a thing if you do it once. And
Yeah.
you might do it for a month and go, oh yeah, I've done it. I've done
Yeah.
everything. It's like, yeah, but are you still doing it?
Well,
Right.
it's
No.
Think about what our ancestors did. Our just like Janet said about her grandma, she did that not 5 days a week, not 3 days a week, 7 days a week.
Every
She got up
day.
at 4
Yeah.
o'clock in the morning, started the wood stove to start cooking, start baking, start doing all that stuff, all the chores, make sure the animals are fed 7 days a week,
Yeah.
every day.
Absolutely.
Didn't take Christmas off,
That's
you
it.
know?
That's
I mean,
it. Very
and
different life. Very different
yeah,
life. And so we have to structure modern life to emulate,
yeah,
what the needs of the body, because that has not changed. Our biology changes extremely slowly. And
right.
so even though our environment changes extremely fast, unless we are doing things that are going to emulate our needs from a biological, physiological, and mechanical perspective, our health is going to deteriorate. And therefore, fertility is suffering.
Right,
Right.
and I get into a debate with this, commonly about genetics. People want to, and I'd love your comments on this, especially the healthcare system. They wanna blame everything on your genes. "Oh, well, you've got diabetes because your mom had diabetes," or "You've got diabetes because your dad did," or "You've got heart disease because, it's just genetic. Your mom and dad both had it." And just like we discussed with epigenetics, probably the reason your mom and dad had it is because of the environment they lived in, which they also put their kids in. But here's the reality. 30 years ago, type 2 diabetes, um,
Rare.
80% of all diabetics were type 1 diabetics, 20% were type 2. Now it's completely reversed.
Oh, yeah.
80% of diabetics are type 2 diabetics, and only 20% are type 1. And you know what? Our genes don't change in 30 years. Genetics don't
No,
change in 30 years. Only our environment does. You can't,
exactly.
in a generation and a half, your genes don't change. So it's not about genetics, people. It's about your environment.
Yeah, and it's about your daily choices. It's like,
Yeah.
again, we will switch on and off genes according to our behaviors, according to our habits. And so what happens is that if we are having habits that are going to make us more susceptible
Mhm.
to a certain development of a health condition, then of course that's going to be more likely. For example, bowel cancer. We now know that bowel cancer is associated with sedentary behavior, not doing enough exercise. We
Right.
know that it's associated with, deli meats, lunch meats, sausages, all of those kind of like very heavily processed meats. So what do we see in this society? An increase in bowel cancer, you know? And now, do you have to develop bowel cancer? Absolutely not. What do you
Yeah.
need to do? Well, you need to make sure that you are doing the things, eating enough fiber, eating enough vegetables, moving your body. Like exercise is going to be like exercise, honestly, on a daily basis, physical activity and exercise. So, it's not the thing about it is that we have to get away from the fact that we go to the gym and it's good enough. It's not. Like, it's about making sure that there was another wonderful study that showed that for people who basically were office workers and sat in desks for most of the day, if every hour they got up and walked around for 20 minutes, all of their insulin resistance markers improved,
Mhm.
which essentially shows that there is immense value and benefit in like a glass of water on your desk. That's a liter. Okay, so that's like, it's a lot of water. It's a whole bottle that you literally have to drink every 30 minutes to an hour, because then you actually have to get up and go to the bathroom,
Right.
and it's little things like that that I think sometimes people need to understand. It doesn't take drastic,
No.
dramatic, complete night and day lifestyle changes to make improvements. It takes consistency, small changes over time. And so
Yeah.
even a simple strategy as setting an alarm every hour to do some star jumps on the spot for a
Yep.
minute,
Right.
that's going to dramatically change the way that the body operates in its physiology, in its biology. And so it's about thinking outside the square and going, okay, well, I can't go and drive to the gym for 2 hours or an hour to then be there for an hour to then drive back home for an hour. That's fine. Get it. But what can you do? What can you do? So focus on that. Focus on what you can do that's going to benefit your health and benefit your life, because that will benefit every other aspect. It will benefit not only fertility right now, your life in the long term. We also know that infertility is kind of like it's a red flag for health
Mhm.
conditions that
Oh yeah. Oh
essentially
yeah.
are going to develop later down the track. So, for
100%.
example, with recurrent miscarriage, let's say that we have an antiphospholipid syndrome picture. We know antiphospholipids is going to increase the risk of stroke. So, if we don't know this, if we don't address it, we'll continue having recurrent miscarriages. Not good. But even worse, in not addressing it and not understanding it and not investigating, is that you're probably also going to end up with a stroke later.
Right.
So when we ignore
Mhm.
fertility red flags, thinking that, it's not that important, we actually are ignoring our long-term health and quality of life.
Yep.
And that's a
Again,
really important thing to
right.
understand.
Again, just back on what we discussed earlier. Healthy people are fertile if they're young. I mean,
Well, right. And this is kind of, we work in the hormone space, but I always look at this that, today in our society we are so afraid of giving somebody estrogen or progesterone or testosterone or thyroid. I mean, it's just like fear factor. And I think my grandmother had so many hormones naturally pumping through her body to have that many children with just think of when she becomes pregnant and carries that baby and then becomes pregnant again and she's nursing and all these natural things that were a rhythm to her body, or even my mother for that matter, that it's like, how dare we say what the natural rhythm of the body is harmful to us if it's in a healthy situation? If it's too
Yeah.
much, I get it, but if it's too little, it's way wrong. And why is it too little? Obviously it has to be because we are doing something different than them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the piece that I think, is so important to understand, is that, medications of any kind, they're wonderful resources to have so that we have the ability to utilize and draw upon them when necessary. And at the same time, asking the question of, okay, what is making me need this?
yeah.
And
Right.
how else can I support my body so that either I can reduce it, come off it, whatever it is. Of
Right.
course, all with the help of your pharmacist and your doctor and, all of the healthcare providers that are supporting you. But really understanding that, okay, if we are making improvements overall, sleeping adequately, drinking enough water, eating well, moving our bodies, we've got to really get into the routine and the habit of going, okay, if this is optimal, let's say above my head, this is optimum behavior. If I'm down here, on my chest with behavior, I'm going to have a certain level of symptoms and challenges that I may not want in the long term. Now, do
Right.
I need to get all this way to get rid of those symptoms and challenges that I'm experiencing? No, you can actually make improvements and you're going to let go a lot of things that are bothering you by just gently and incrementally going up in that kind of scale, going up in the level of health. So it's about understanding as well that wherever you are today is
Mhm.
not an end and final point.
Hmm.
You
Right.
can input good habits for improvement. And at any point, and this is one of the things that I love about the human body, is the fact that no matter how unwell you are, if you intervene in a positive way and you remove the obstacles to optimum health, it's incredible the innate wisdom
Mhm.
of the body and what it is able to achieve in transformation is awe-inspiring. It's incredible. So it's about giving the body the ability and the resources, removing the obstacles, and giving it the things that it needs to perform well. And it's amazing. It's miraculous,
It,
the changes that are possible.
right. I mean, we are very, very wonderfully created, and it's amazing how resilient our body is, and how much poison and crap
It
we
can take.
can right. And then it's amazing how when you reverse that and you give your body the right input, sleep, diet,
Yes.
and movement in that order. Sleep is the most important.
100%.
Diet second, exercise is third. We talked about how important exercise was, but you cannot exercise your way out of a bad diet. It's impossible.
No, you cannot. And also, if we really look at diet for what it is the number one greatest exposure the body has on a daily basis, several times a day. Nutritional
Several times a day, you're
epidemiologists
right.
show several
Yep.
times a day. It's
Yep.
it's the nutritional epidemiologist dream and nightmare all at one time, because what happens is that we know in nutritional epidemiology, one of the things that is so clear is that diet is an exposure, disease is the outcome,
Right.
or health, right? So, but it depends on what you're inputting. If you're inputting, those drinks on a daily basis that you were talking about just before, it is going to lead to disease. The
Yeah.
outcome is going to be disease. It's not going to be health.
Right.
Therefore, we need to be really aware of what kind of exposure am I inputting when it comes to diet. Because if we are not inputting the correct exposure, the outcome is self-determined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Gabriela, we're gonna have to cut you off because we are like
Wait.
we're
We
approaching
are
an
so
hour.
over. Oh my God.
Yeah, I love this stuff. We geek out on this stuff. We love it. We could talk for hours about all the stuff you're talking about because you're on the same page as us, for sure. As we wrap this podcast up, I want you to say, what do you have a passion for?
Oh my God. Health, life, and all the exciting things that, I think that, gosh, I have so many passions. I can't pick one, but definitely I think health is a big one.
And if anybody has any questions and want to follow up with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, fertilitybreakthrough.com. They can Google me, so Gabriela Rosa, Gabriela Rosa. And if you can't write Fertility Breakthrough, don't worry, Google will help you. And of course, they can go ahead and find Fertility Breakthrough, the book, which is free on Spotify and YouTube, and it's available in every bookseller. So, that's a really great resource for people to have as well. And we have a free program called the Fertility Challenge, which is a 4-week program where people get to learn what are the right inputs, what are the things that you can do to optimize your fertility, and, what are the really important essential testing that you need to have so that you get clarity around what else could be getting in the way in terms of fertility. So people can just, go to the website or Google Gabriela Rosa Fertility Challenge and they'll find that as well.
Awesome. Love it. Well, Gabriela, you've helped us realize our goal today, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. And you've definitely done that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune into our regularly scheduled podcast, Monday, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.